The news recently broke that Toriyama Akira, the creator of Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump, and creative presence in other properties such as Dragon Quest and Chrono Trigger, has passed away at the age of 68. This news, needless to say, is a major shock to myself and surely to many, many other people. And it seems so strange that one of the most powerful figures in the history of anime has passed away. I don't normally like to go into intensely personal dives about myself and relationship with media just because it's not how I typically tend to structure things on my channel, but considering the sheer importance that Dragon Ball has in my own anime life, I feel like not doing so would just functionally feel wrong on some level. I know that my story will not be completely unique. I'm very much aware of that, but I feel so emotional at the present time that I feel like I have to say something. And I really, really hope that you'll share your own stories as well, whether in your own videos or in comments, or however you choose to share what Toriyama's stories, regardless of what they are, meant to you. I grew up watching Dragon Ball on the Toonami block growing up in the 1990s, and I didn't know what anime was at the time. I just knew that it was a cartoon, and I loved cartoons growing up, and it was one of the earliest things that myself and my older brother obsessed over. We would sit in front of our television screens, glued to what was happening, on the edge of our seats whenever there was a fight, or laughing whenever there was a funny moment, and just relishing in the unbridled enthusiasm and joy that seemed to be pouring out of the TV. It got to the point where we even created Dragon Ball fan fiction with ourselves fighting alongside the Z Warriors as characters. When we finally got game consoles for ourselves, we soaked up just about every single Dragon Ball game that we could get our hands on. We were involved in debates with our friends about who was the best character, who was stronger. Talking about Dragon Ball, for me at least, on the playground was as common as talking about Pokemon or Digimon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever happened to be the, even if I didn't realize it at the time, the main anime fixation that everybody was zeroing in on. On our parents' cable package, we actually had access to some Japanese TV channels, one of which was playing reruns of the Japanese dub of Dragon Ball, and because of that, and they were playing episodes that were not going to be translated into English for months, if not years, my brother and I knew what was going to happen in the story before anybody else did. And so he, myself, and our mutual friend Jackie bonded over that as a kind of closely guarded secret, and how we had this insider information, so while everybody else was being scared about how the Frieza saga would end, we were all just relishing in the knowledge that there was a lot more that was to come, and that this story still had so many chapters still to go. The level of just fervor and fever that Dragon Ball had for all of us just simply consumed us. The original 290 some odd episode run of Dragon Ball Z, I've watched in full about 4 or 5 times, and I've watched it in part numerous times. It was one of the very first manga that I ever picked up and read cover to cover all the way through with seemingly no pause that I had. It was like my limiter had been taken off whenever Dragon Ball was involved in anything. My brother and I, when we would wrestle or we would fight in the house, we would act like Dragon Ball characters. We would do the power-up ahs, and we would fire energy waves with our hands, even though we obviously can't do that. But the fact is, Dragon Ball was such a major fixation of my early life, and it instilled in me very, very early on a love of anime, like I said, before I even knew what the hell anime even was. And while obviously certain parts of Dragon Ball are not as good as other parts, and while there are some parts of it that have also aged like milk, which is to say nothing of the television treatment of especially early Dragon Ball Super, my level of just sheer love for this material is just so deep, and so ingrained into who I am as an anime manga fan that I owe this series and I owe Toriyama so much for instilling my love of this so early, which is part of the reason why the news of his death has just completely caught me off guard. And like I said, I feel the need to share this because I know I'm not alone here, and I know that there are other people who surely have a special place in their hearts for Dragon Ball, or even for people who don't like Dragon Ball, but can at least acknowledge or appreciate just what it actually means as a shonen, or even beyond just a shonen, what it means as just a cultural event, as a cultural artifact. It will long, long, long outlive Toriyama's own life, and we all knew this, to be sure, but it still doesn't necessarily take away the sting of Toriyama's death. He wished to bring happiness to so many people, and in the immortal words of Shenron, your wish has been granted. So, for those of you out there for whom Dragon Ball has special significance, regardless of how or in the ways in which it manifested, you're not alone in feeling sad. You can be you can be angry, you can be confused. What matters is that, just like the Z Warriors themselves, we're all in this together. And, well, I'll leave it at that, I guess. Rest in peace, Toriyama.